You know, Wendell, sometimes we play with computers all day long, and sometimes don't you just want to go back to the old days and just color?
I do enjoy coloring.
Well, that's a good thing because that's exactly what we're going to do in this episode. We are going to teach you guys how to take apart some of your components and color them. So, Wendell, what are we going to color today?
Well, today we're going to recolor an EVGA 770 ACX.
Yeah, it's a 777 GTX 77. Where am I going with that? Yeah, we had the GTX 770. This one came out of your personal rig, right?
Yes.
So you have risked your personal component here. Now, guys, we are not going to take responsibility for anything that you break. If you take this apart and do exactly what we say, and something goes wrong and it's broken, do not blame us. It was your decision to do it based upon our information. We're just providing with the information, and this is all fine print at the bottom. So
and this technique, you don't necessarily have to start out. If seems a little intimidating and you haven't done anything like this before, start on broken hardware or other hardware. You can actually, like, if you just have cheap dollar store crap, not even like internal computer components, probably it's made out of the same kind of plastic, so you can practice on that and it'll be fine.
So let's go ahead and get started with this one. Now, the first thing we need to do is take it apart, and every component is going to be a little bit different. This one is going to be specific just to the 770 with the ACX cooling unit from EVGA, but you know, if you wanted to color the back of your laptop or take apart a mouse or something, each one of those, usually you can find like a repair guide or a teardown guide on the internet. So go and Google that. We're not going to do it for you. Find exactly the one that goes, you know, with your hardware, and then take it apart accordingly. It's that simple.
Yeah, you really want to be careful and think carefully about what you want to recolor. So in our case, we're looking at the EVGA, and it's like, it would be nice if we could recolor the fans and the shroud, and we could probably get away with recoloring the fans, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to show you guys how to do that, because you have to take the fans apart, and then you have to take the bearing apart, except for there are some video cards that the fans just pop in and out. But that's sort of a 200 level thing, so we're not going to recolor the fans in this video. We're only going to recolor the plastic shrouds, and you want to be careful not to spray paint your heatsink or your printed circuit board or anything like that. These are strictly just the cosmetic plastic components.
The other thing about recoloring fans is the fact that if you add too much of the enamel, or what is the vinyl dye, it's going to make them heavier, and that's going to require more voltage, and it's also going to create more drag. So it may reduce the life of the fan. I would just totally recommend buying a fan in the color that you like. They make fans in all sorts of colors, and if you've got a special heatsink like the ACX heatsink here, you probably just want to leave that alone. So that's what we did. All right. So in order to get the ACX cooling unit shroud off, what did you do, Wendell?
Well, you got to look around the video card and see how it's put together. At first, I thought there were only 2 screws holding it in, but there were also 2 hidden screws that I sort of had to get at sideways. And so you just sort of take a screwdriver and take the screws out, and then the thing sort of pops and folds up. And then at that point, you've got the cover. But you notice we've got these gold accents here. Well, most of the time, those are just stickers. And so what you do is you flip the housing around and look at it and see if there's like gold protruding through, because sometimes they won't use an adhesive, they'll just have something sticking through the plastic holding it in. But in this case, there wasn't anything like that, and they were stickers, so you can wedge something underneath the accents and pull them off. You could also mask them off with like masking tape, but it comes out better if you can always separate it into just the plastic parts and then just re-stick it later.
So what did you use to get that off of there? You had like a very thin screwdriver, right?
It was I've got a pair of tweezers that are wedge shaped that work really well for this, so I could wedge it under there and then grab a hold of it with the tweezers and pull. But a flat screwdriver would work really well if it was broad and really thin. A knife will also work really well.
Yeah, make sure your knife is sharp, and also, you know, if you make some nasty cut marks on anything, we are not responsible. I'm going to reiterate that a lot throughout this video, because I don't want any hate mail saying like, hey, you guys broke my component. I've received mail like that when people do things and then they email us saying, hey, you broke this thing. Like, I came to your house while you were asleep and smashed it with a hammer, then left. That's what it's like. Anyway.
I'm remembering the very first thing that I ever encountered that went viral was Apple tech support calls, and one of them was, you sawed off the back of the motherboard. What?
And I bet they were calling Apple like, "You broke my machine."
Yeah, it was like you saw it off the back of the motherboard so that it would fit in, some other cases. Like, sir, that's not. How would you? What? I don't even understand.
Oh man.
That same thing. There was like this guy that I aspired to be. He had like the calmest voice, and the Apple person was like, but sir, you would have to like dump the ROMs and run it debug mode, whatever. And he's sort of wheezing, and he's like, yeah, you needn't concern yourself with that. And it's like, well, that's creepy.
All right, let's get down to the coloring technique. You want to do this in a place that's well ventilated. Make sure you have a large room with a window, or you can do it outside. And you also want to make sure that you're not going to be getting any dust on whatever you're going to color. In fact, you probably want to clean it off. Make sure there's no fingerprints on there, because the oil from your hands can create a residue, and that's just a layer that's going to keep some of the paint from sticking properly. It's going to be weird. So make sure no dust and no fingerprints. Go ahead.
Now, also, the finding this stuff is a little weirder than you expect. Probably your auto supply store, your local auto supply store, is probably a good bet. Here in the States, we've got AutoZone and O'Reilly's and places like that. You can go in there and talk to them about, they're not going to understand if you say you're going to recolor some plastic parts on your computer. But if you go in and you're like, I have some plastic parts like from a dashboard or from door panels or whatever, and I'm going to recolor them all so that they all match, they'll understand. And you can bring in the plastic, and there are certain kinds of dye that are better for other kinds of plastic. And the people at AutoZone generally have a pretty good knowledge of that kind of thing, so they can point you in the right direction for what kind of thing you need. And if you're not sure, just get a couple different things and then try them on like test plastic that feels the same.
And once you know something works, you can always go online and reorder, just the same thing that worked for you in the past, and that could be easy. But Wendell is totally right when he says that if you go in there and say you want to recolor something on your computer, it's probably going to derail the entire conversation, and it's going to turn to like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? What's going on? So just go in there and tell them you're recoloring some vinyl or something in your car, and then all of a sudden they'll be like, oh, we got just the stuff for you. It'll totally change the conversation. All right, so now we've got it cleaned. You take like some alcohol, put it on a paper towel, wipe it off. If you want to make sure there's no fibers left on there, use a coffee filter and wipe it off, because coffee filters don't produce fibers, because who wants to drink a glass of fiber unless you need that in your diet?
Metamucil.
Anyway, all right, I'll let you go talk through the spraying technique.
So the deal with vinyl dye is that it reacts a little bit with the plastic, and so you've got to get your fingerprint oils and contaminants and whatever, if there's any kind of anything on there, it's going to interfere with the vinyl dye sort of absorbing and being reacted with the plastic. This is not like spray paint. This stuff goes on super, super thin. Whatever texture details you've got, we'll have a close up of that. Whatever texture details you've got, those are going to be preserved. And you don't see it as much on this, because there's not really that much of a surface texture here, but there are other projects that we've recolored, and you'll see that in our upcoming video of our like complete computer recolor thing that we did, which is sort of crazy, that you can preserve those very small surface details. And so this stuff, you got to do the rule with it is a lot of coats and a very little bit every time. You don't want to overdo it.
So it is going to take a little while. And you also, if you ever spray painted and then like you get the spray paint can, if you get really close to the wall, it creates like a glob of spray paint, or it just goes on way too strong, creates like an ugly area, and then it runs. And it's the same idea with this. You want to kind of get back quite a few feet, 2 or 3 feet away, maybe a couple feet, not 3 feet. That's probably too far. But you want to do like a brushing motion, and almost like you're just spraying the air. You're using it as a paintbrush back and forth. Am I right here?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And if the more unsure you are, the farther away you can be, because there's less chance of accidental overspray if you're starting really far away. And that's what we did in the video. And if you watch as we apply each coat, we get a little bit closer, a little bit more comfortable with it. But it's really hard to correct if you accidentally overspray, because you're going to be like cleaning the paint off with alcohol, and then it's not going to be the same as everywhere else. And it takes a lot of skill to recover from that overspray situation, and you're better off to just go slow. Let each coat dry. Depending on what kind of paint you have, it could be 15 minutes or 4 hours. Although with the first few coats, because it's reacting with the plastic, I would say that no matter what the directions say, you ought to give it at least a couple hours, and it does work better if whatever you're spraying is warm.
Since you're going to be spraying sort of broad strokes, you want to make sure that you have the surface area covered. Like put down some cardboard, put down a lot of cardboard, put down a piece of lumber. What are you doing this on? Like pieces of sheetrock, or what is that?
Yeah, it's old pieces of sheetrock. There's all kinds of layers of stuff there to make it easy to clean up from the mess. We had some leftover sheetrock from another project, so it was just like, oh, I can just use this. It's going to be painted again someday anyway. And by the end of the video, you can see how much paint is on the sheetrock, but that's okay. That's what you've got to do to really get a good finish on your final product.
I also want to note that toward the I guess the end, when you were doing your last few coats, you started getting closer, mainly because you were just ready to be done with it and move on. But when you're doing this at home, you should make sure just do it the same way every time. Stand back and get nice broad strokes to make an even coat. All right. So how many coats did you end up doing?
I think it's a total of like 8 coats, though I can't imagine doing any less than 4 or 5. So even though this is not like an all-day long project, this is not something you're going to get done in a short amount of time. You got to go slow, and slow and steady wins the race.
But something also, you don't need to sit there and babysit it. You do one coat, you go do something else. You come back, do another coat, go do something else.
So it'll be more susceptible to scratches and things like that immediately after you're done. Or while you're doing it and immediately after you're done. So if you want to be really careful, after it's completely done, you should wait a day or two before putting it in your computer. Otherwise, it'll be easier to scratch.
All right, so let's say you've waited a little while, and the next thing you need to do is just put it back together. And here's how it looks in the end. It's actually interesting. You know what? I'm really happy about this part because there's the Galaxy GTX 780 that's just now coming out. And it's really pretty. It's got a white PCB, but everybody's going to have one. Nobody's going to have one of these. This is like the only white GTX 770 with an ACX cooling unit. It could be the only one in the world. I don't know. I mean, does somebody else out there have one? I'm sure someone else is going to have one in about a day after we make this video, but Wendell, this might be the only one in the world.
It's certainly the only one that we've put together.
Yeah, go ahead.
We've also got the only. Do we want to talk about the Griffin?
Oh,
it's a different.
By all means.
So it's like you can sort of see it in the background there. We've got a white Griffin. The Griffin, Asus has the Griffin and the Sabertooth, which have their plastic thermal armor, and for recoloring, that suits our recoloring purposes really well. The EVGA ACX cover is really understated. It's not. There's not really like a lot of fanciness to the plastic or what. Yeah, exactly.
There's no curves or bumps or anything like that.
It's a really good recoloring candidate. Some of the other coolers, they have accents or the plastic's fancier. It's got, like little bolts and nuts and sort of steampunk stuff molded into the plastic. This is just a real cool, understated cooler, which lends itself. Now, if you want to do cherry red or fluorescent purple or, hot pink, same technique works with all that as well.
Pink and green, go for it, guys. I want to see it. Make it look like flowers on the inside. You can do anything you want. It's your own happy little world, so just paint it the way that makes you the happiest. And that's going to conclude this video. Now what you should do is go check out our white PC video. Even if, this GTX 770 with the ACX cooler painted white, even if that is not the only one in the world, I guarantee you that our system with the white Asus Griffin and the white GTX 770, I guarantee you that this will be a completely unique system. So go ahead and check out our video on our almost all white, but some black. It's black and white, but mostly white PC. Click on the screen right here, and you guys can see that. Let us know how your own coloring projects go. Just drop them in the forum. There's also a link right here on the page, and you can click on the description as well. So we'll see you next time.